Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Perceptive podcast here on Game Wisdom, where we examine the art and science of games. I'm, of course, Josh Bycer. We had another great cast lineup for you this week. My guest is a longtime guest of Game Wisdom, but this is the first time we're actually chatting to him with video and here on the YouTube channel. He is the founder of Serenity Forge, an indie developer as well as a publisher of multiple games. And for tonight's cast, we're going to be kind of catching up with him, as well as discussing what is happening with the Death's Gambit kind of expansion slash re-release that is happening. For those of you watching this right now, should be happening just as this cast goes up. So please welcome from Serenity Forge, Z. How are you doing?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me. Really excited to be here.
Yeah, it is great to chat with you again. Like I said, we chatted, I think, like 2-3 years ago. It was like before the crazy times happened. So it seems like it's been a very long time.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it seems like last time we talked, it must have been at least like 2-3 years ago, and yeah, a lot has changed. Serenity Forge has grown quite a bit, and as you mentioned, we're now not just developing our own games, but also publishing a lot of games onto different platforms, as well as started our own physical publishing. So we're now distributing games across all the retailers like Walmart, Target, Best Buy, GameStop, etc. So yeah, it's been quite a journey. A lot of very stressful nights, but also very exciting, work that kind of came out of it at the end of the day.
All right, and congratulations on that. It has been pretty crazy around here as well. I think last time we spoke, I had like no books, and the YouTube channel was still just very much fledgling at that point. Right now, we are knocking on 8,000 subscribers. I have 4 books out with a 5th I'm going to be having to write very shortly, and things have certainly grown around here as well.
Yeah, that's fantastic. It's really amazing keeping up with your success over the years too.
Yep, and you as well. So I know we have about like 30 minutes or so for our chat this week. So let's get into it. My first question for you, like I said, the last time we spoke, it was, I think, before the YouTube channel really took off. I don't think we even did like anything here on YouTube exclusively. So for my audience tuning in who don't know who you are, could you give us a brief rundown of who you are and what is Serenity Forge?
Yeah, absolutely. My name is Z. I am the founder and executive director at Serenity Forge. Serenity Forge is a video game company that focuses on creating very meaningful, very impactful, very emotionally driven video games. I started the company back when I was still in high school. I started making video games by myself, and throughout college kept on making games as well. Really, the founding story of Serenity Forge is that when I was 18 years old, I was diagnosed with a near fatal illness that caused me to be hospitalized for 2 years. And during those 2 years, I spent a lot of time playing video games while going through chemotherapy and all that. And yeah, I mean, I was exposed to all sorts of different games, single player games that made me feel like a hero, go out there, save the world, feel really good about myself. And also multiplayer games where I was able to be introduced to all sorts of people online, made new friends when I was, physically trapped and not able to socialize otherwise. So from that experience, essentially video games were there for me when nothing else was, and they ultimately saved my life. In Eventually I was able to kind of transfer back into college, but I couldn't help but think back to myself, these games that I was playing, like Final Fantasy or League of Legends, these games weren't really designed to help me, but they ended up saving my life. What if I dedicate attention and really spend my life creating video games for the intention of helping other people? What kind of power can we unlock there? And that's when I started Serenity Forge. I wanted to start making games for the purpose of enriching people's lives, creating strong emotional impact, and really expanding people's horizons. So yeah, I mean, over the years, we released a lot of different games. One of the first games that we released was Lifeless Planet, which actually we launched when I was still in college, my senior year. Did pretty well for a bunch of college students. So we felt like maybe we should keep on doing stuff like that. Over the years, we kept on working with PC and then eventually consoles and even mobile devices at one point. And nowadays we have a pretty large slate of content, games like Doki Doki Literature Club Plus, games like Sign and a Happiness, Freakpocalypse, and of course the game that we're launching today as we speak, Death's Gambit Afterlife. These are all games that are very strong in its emotions, very narrative driven, and things that we're really proud of to put out there in the world.
Mm-hmm. Right. And yeah, we've been chatting for now, I think like 4 or 5 years, like right as you started really to build up with Serenity Forge. And I remember during our first cast, like it was still very much you focusing on like digital games, your own exclusive titles. So what has led to Serenity Forge's growth? As we said just before we started this cast, you're doing more physical publishing or physical production. You're doing more publishing of indie games these days. So what's been happening on that front?
Yeah, I think really at the end of the day, looking back at all these years working in games, the one thing that I can always draw on as kind of the centerpiece for how we're able to continue growing, continue learning, is kind of our this undying thirst for curiosity at Serenity Forge. I myself am a very curious person. I just could never stop wondering what is on the other side of that fence. So when we first talked many years ago, I think I was actually starting my sophomore year in college. It was the first time that we spoke. And yeah, I mean, at that time we were just learning Unity. It was like Unity 1 or Unity 2. We were working on our first games. And the whole time releasing games, it was how do we release the game on Steam? Because at the time it wasn't like Greenlight wasn't even around. It was a really long time ago.
Yeah.
How do we release the game on Steam? And then eventually releasing a game on Steam, we're like, how do we release games on the Wii U and the PlayStation?
Mm-hmm.
So then we started doing that. And then once we started publishing onto consoles, we thought, okay, well, how about we release more games working with different people in different capacities? So now we're publishing games and also developing games that are published by other people. And then eventually I was like, how do we release games at Walmart? And we started figuring that out. So really, it's just a constant question of like, what is on the other side of what we're not currently doing? And before you know it, Serenity Forge became this company where not only are we able to do the very low level, which is thinking about game ideas and actually writing those games in code ourselves, all the way to the high level stuff, that customer facing stuff of selling literal games at Target on the shelves, right? So once we're able to kind of create that entire width, that breadth of pipelines, then we're able to now identify key points for us to improve on, key points that we want to focus more on, and that's kind of where Serenity Forge is today. We're very comprehensive, just kind of like goes from one end of the spectrum to the other, and kind of covering everything in between.
Mm-hmm. I kind of find it funny that you're talking about how big it is to be published on or have your games like at Target and Walmart. When for a lot of indie developers, most of them doing like being digital has been such a huge deal, like in that space. But it's still, I think, a very big thing to have games in a physical space, especially for general consumers. So I'm sure there's still people out there who I know for my audience may be shocked about this who don't use Steam or they're not really up on things in terms of that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the main reasons why we want to start a physical publishing branch of the business is because we realize that Serenity Forge's goal is to create tangible, meaningful value for society. And in order for us to do that, we need to make sure that we're able to serve all the gamers out there, not just people who use Steam, not just people who download games on the eShop. So because of that, we thought about what are some other people that are being neglected essentially by a digital only distribution, and that would be the moms or grandmas buying games for kids at Christmas, right? That would be people who otherwise don't have internet access, so they can't buy games digitally. It may be people who are in different regions of the world where their internet access is not very, very open, like we are here out in the Western hemisphere. So in general, we have identified a few reasons where these are the people that we want to cater towards, because really no one else is catering towards them. I mean, if you go to Walmart or Target, you see games on the shelves. It's just, I don't know if Pro Bass Fishing 2 is necessarily the right title I want parents buying for their kids at Christmas. Meanwhile, imagine if you're able to sell games like Undertale or games
Mhm.
like Stardew Valley in more of these capacities. That would be so much more meaningful in a mass retail distribution. So that's kind of why we decided to really kind of explore these new areas.
Mhm. Yep. And with kind of the games that you've been publishing, you've mentioned a few minutes, of course, about you're really leaning towards games that have like unique stories and unique experiences. And I remember, I think it was late last year that you guys published a Doki Doki Literature Club, and that was kind of like came out of like left field because I thought that game was like already out. I didn't think it was going to get another release.
Yeah, Doki Doki Literature Club Plus was a very unique experience. So the original game, Doki Doki Literature Club, was released in 2017 as a free title for PC only, and those people who have played the game obviously know that there's some unique elements to the game design where it required itself to be on the PC platform in order for it to function. Um, so when we started working with Dan and Team Salvato on how to make that work on different platforms, a lot of ideas came to mind, and really the biggest one for us was, how are we able to create something that's subversive, but also something that's already expected to be subversive? How do we create something that is unexpected, but still make it so that it's mentally acceptable for that to be unexpected? So a lot of that actually became really hard. As you may be aware, Doki Doki Literature Club is a very gruesome. It's very shocking game. It's very difficult for people to handle. So we spent a lot of time making sure that we had the proper messaging. We were very upfront about how this game is not intended for children, not intended to for people who are mentally disturbed. We wanted to make sure that all of that is very upfront. However, with that said, we then present something that is exactly not that on the in terms of marketing, because that's the whole point of the game. So with all of that, we created content warnings. We created a whole universe around the game that wasn't at all advertised, and ultimately, Doki Doki Literature Club Plus was marketed as a port of the original game, which in itself already raised a lot of questions because it is a game that literally cannot really be ported. So then a port of that game is just, that's kind of interesting how you ported a game like that. So that raised a lot of questions. And then once people start playing it, you start to realize that there's actually a lot more to it. So it's kind of like in the original game, it was marketed as a dating sim, and then the subversion is that it's not a dating sim, it's a horror game. Now we're marketing this really weird looking horror game as a port of the original game. But once you start playing it, you realize it's not really just a port of the original game. And that's kind of where the subversion of the new title comes from.
Yeah, and again, like it's very interesting. We don't have the time to get in today, but just how fascinating things have really, I think, changed in terms of indie development, especially since the last time we spoke, even the first time that we spoke, and just like how much we're seeing, developers, I think, really trying to push for higher value indie games, especially over like the last, I would say, 2 to 3 years, with hits like Celeste, Disco Elysium, Slay the Spire, and so on. But I guess, this will, I think, probably be a good lead to talk more about Death's Gambit. But as a developer and a publisher now, what do you think about kind of like, the bar being slowly but surely being raised higher and higher in terms of not only what people expect out of indie games, but what indie developers are delivering in today's market?
Yeah, I mean, I think we talked even about this probably years ago about
Mm-hmm.
how the term indie games is just a really murky
Yep.
word. I think now more than ever, and probably will continue to be more exaggerated as time goes on, is the fact that indie games isn't really tangible anymore. I think
Mm-hmm.
it's almost impossible for us to measure whether or not a game is indie. It kind of depends on your existing experience. It's really hard and kind of blurry where indie games are and AAA lies. Is Undertale an indie game? Well, it certainly made more money than a lot of AAA games did. Is Ori and the Blind Forest an indie game? Well, it looks and plays like an indie game and it's beautiful, but it definitely didn't have an indie game budget. I mean, like, I think there's a lot of different conversations that people can have regarding indie games. To answer your question more fully, I think the really the cause, the main root cause of why video game kind of like, as you said, this bar has been raising over the years is probably because the barrier of entry has continued to lower. Game engines like Unity, Unreal is now even becoming more easily accessible. You have Game Maker, RPG Maker, Ren'Py or visual novel makers. I mean, there's so many different tools out there now for people to make games with. It's just so much easier for literally anyone, a teenager with a computer, no access to any documentation, no access to any programming knowledge, to go out there and make a game and release it on Steam or release it on Itch or Game Jolt, when they want to. And those are some of the games that you see over the years that really hit it big. I mean, Doki Doki Literature Club, for example, was Ren'Py. It was a completely free quote unquote engine for visual novels. Games like Five Nights at Freddy's, right? A very straightforward game that didn't really take a lot of effort to, or not effort, but more so, I guess, technological experience to make, is able to succeed very well. I mean, today, Imposter Factory just launched, which is an RPG Maker game off of the To the Moon franchise. I mean, let's just look at that franchise overall. All of those games were made in RPG Maker. Another really good example would be Lisa the Painful, and another RPG Maker game that is very, very intense and created very strong impact, where again, literally no programming knowledge, not a single line of code was written in order to make a game like that. So it kind of goes to show that because the barrier of entry is lower, that means now the horse race is not about whether or not you have access to the technology. Now it's about that you have access to creative thought. So once that happens, the barrier, the next barrier comes out of ingenuity. It comes out of kind of like, do you have the mental the mindset to think about what's next, as well as other things like art, music, technical art, just really marketing powers. And ultimately, at the end of the day, budget, potentially rich parents. So a lot of these things are now kind of what people are competing on when they make an indie game, and that kind of naturally raises the production quality, production value.
Yep, and I mean, we're seeing like more itch games coming over to Steam now, and even just like itch creators getting, I think, more time in the spotlight. So it's something to be very fascinating to see like where things are going to go, especially as this market continues to mature. So I think with that, let's talk a little bit more about Death's Gambit, because the game, as by the time for those of you listening or watching us, it should be out, or it's actually out right now. So Death's Gambit, this was a game that came out, when, 2017? Again, like, time just has no meaning anymore these days.
Yeah, Death's Gambit came out a few years ago. It is a kind of it's a Metroidvania that was very Dark Souls inspired. So it has very difficult to master controls. However, it kind of takes place in this 2D Metroidvania universe. It actually has a pretty strong combination of something like Castlevania and something like Metroid. So in terms of narrative, it's actually kind of interesting that there is a mashup of both sci-fi futuristic civilizations as well as this medieval kind of fantasy setting. But yeah, so we just launched Death's Gambit Afterlife, which is really kind of its definitive release. Over the past few years, we worked really hard to bring additional content to the game. There's a very strong fan base as well that's kind of playing the game every day, and because of that, we're able to take a lot of inspiration and feedback from the fan base to kind of make the game better. Really, with this most recent launch, we're able to double the size of the world. I believe I believe out of all the Metroidvanias out there, Death's Gambit Afterlife actually has the largest actual world for you to explore in, just from so much area that you're able to cover in this world. And then on top of that, we tripled the amount of weapons you're able to use in this game. We have our original game had 22 talents that you're able to choose, talents and skills. Now you have 100 plus talents and skills for you to choose from and make your own build. There's multiple endings now. We also increased the number of bosses to 20 and reworked 10 of them. So overall, there's just a lot more content to this game, and really is it's a comprehensive package for people who just really like Metroidvania games.
Yeah, and for those of you watching, we did play through Death's Gambit back in 2018, and when I played it, I liked it. I didn't really like fully loved it, and part of that I think came down to like some of the mechanic decisions and just how the overall gameplay flowed. And one question I always like to ask developers, especially when they do remakes, remasters, things like that, is how did you approach, I guess, quote unquote, fixing the game or changing it? Because for a lot of people watching, they're probably not thinking about Death's Gambit as, a game to return to. So for them, like, what are you doing mechanic wise, or how do you approach the mechanical fixes or overhaul of it?
Yeah, so one of the things that's probably not very obvious is the fact that Death's Gambit Afterlife's entire world has been redesigned. There's a lot of different locations, a lot of different placements of assets. Literally, the platforms have changed from the original game. The reason why we changed that is because the powers you get are different now. You're able to air dash pretty much right after you beat the first boss. You're able to double jump a lot sooner, and you're able to essentially traverse the world with a lot more tools. And with those tools, we had to kind of blow the whole world open to have a lot more I guess flexibility for the player to kind of make their own choices. So at the end of the day, what happened is that Death's Gambit is just a lot bigger of a game. So you're able to explore a lot more. You're able to make choices a lot more. You have a lot more different builds for players to kind of go through the game. One of the new classes that we added is this mage class, where you're not just using a melee weapon anymore. You're using entirely 100% ranged weapons. So if you're using ranged weapons, then all of a sudden we're gonna have to change the game to make it so that that's also an acceptable way to beat the game. Some parts of it a lot easier than before. Some parts of it actually a lot harder as well. So it kind of comes down to who you want to be. With the new talent trees, we're actually able to now create kind of combinations of classes. You can have your battle mage kind of class where you have a magical weapon that scales with your intelligence, for example, but is also melee at the same time. Really, like a lot of these different builds, inspired almost by games like Skyrim, like where you're able to kind of build who you want to be. I think that's really the core of making this game a totally different experience. So really, again, the game does not play very similarly to where it was before, and you're really, again, it's kind of focused more on the self, focused more on who you want to be and how you want to tackle the world. There's just a lot of replay value as well with all these different classes and all these different builds, because you can probably do a mage run and then now you go back and do some kind of a crazy scythe run, or something like that. So yeah, there's just a lot of content for people to chew through.
Interesting. And I guess another question for you, Z, is what attracted you and Serenity Forge to kind of picking up Death's Gambit and taking ownership and becoming the publisher of it?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things about the original game, as you have mentioned earlier too, is that it wasn't really a fully finished experience, and we can all honestly just say that. The developers at White Rabbit has never really fully wanted to release the game in its original state, and it was due to other pressures that they had to make that happen. Looking at the situation, the way that we look at it is that the Death Gambit Afterlife is really kind of its official release, whereas the original game was kind of more an early access build, perhaps, that was kind of released out there into the wild. So with that said, what really drew the game to Serenity Forge is the fact that the game is very narrative. It's very atmospheric. It's a world that you can really grasp onto. There's very strong characters, and now with the multiple endings and the more complex kind of the lore around the world, there's just a lot here for you to be emotionally engaged in. That plus the fact that it's just a really good Metroidvania game with amazing mechanics and a lot of content for you to go through. Really interesting boss designs that are just really fun to interact with. A lot of that kind of combined together just made it a perfect package for Serenity Forge, and that's why we were so excited to be working on this.
Mm-hmm. In terms of, I guess, the learning or trying to figure out ways to improve the game, how did like you and the developers kind of like approach like the community and kind of get feedback on this? Because there's something we talk about a lot on our casts, not just like our discussions, but just in general here on Game Wisdom, about looking at the feedback that you're getting and figuring out, how to parse and how to run with it.
Yeah, I mean, at Serenity Forge, we are very open to feedback. We're probably some of the most open-minded people in our company, if I'm being honest. We take feedback very seriously, and we actually conduct a lot of they're not really in person, but very how would you say it? Like planned play tests with people who are key members of the community, or even just key people who are able to kind of give feedback really well in the industry. So yeah, I mean, with Death's Gambit and really all of our games, we spent a ton of resources on listening to the community, getting feedback, testing out the feedback to see if it's actually good. And we would spend a lot of resources on hiring QA studios and hiring just functionality and compliance QA to make sure that our games run well, and they play well, and they actually feel good for the users. So really a kind of a combination of that kind of QA and feedback strategy, and really community management strategy as well, is what drives a lot of how we do things here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and with a game like Death's Gambit, especially being more on the high level of a Souls-like, 2D action game, I know it attracted. Once I'm about cough. Excuse me. I know it attracted a lot of hardcore fans, and one of the things with trying to overhaul the game has been trying to make it more appealing to either newcomers or more approachable. Is there anything that you can talk about in terms of, I guess, softening the difficulty curve of the game?
Yeah, I mean the game originally was pretty hard. There's a lot of mechanics that were hard to pick up, just like Dark Souls, right? Where it could be very punishing. We made the game a lot more driven by flow. Now there's a lot more control schemes. There's a lot more control options. There's a lot more skills for you to choose from. For you to traverse the world and able to feel empowered in how you move. There's also more mechanics, like in the beginning, you get to test out what classes you want to be before you make any choices. You get to essentially create your build as soon as the game starts by picking your weapons, picking your skills, picking your items that you want to start with, that you're most comfortable with. That's really important too. The world is open. There's a lot more paths for you to explore the world in. So with that, you're able to kind of make the choices. Maybe you're just not very good at jumping puzzles at this moment, and you want to go, compete some in more combat-driven challenges. And then maybe by the time you're done with those, you're kind of more exposed to the jumping, and you can kind of tackle those challenges now. A lot of that is more planned in the Afterlife release, whereas the original game kind of had more linear, I suppose, choice. You didn't really have a lot more choices in how you wanted to tackle things, and then ultimately, just having a bigger world means that there's a lot more diversity in the challenges that you're presented. So you're able to kind of have that curve be a little bit slower. Have a lower slope for you to get into the game, so that by the time you really do get to that challenge spike from the old game, now you had all this kind of ramp up to it, so that you're not too taken by surprise by a super difficult boss fight or something. So really, again, it's kind of like a very comprehensive way to approach solving the same problem, but in a lot of different kind of solutions to guiding the player.
Mm-hmm. So, as a question for you, and like with Serenity Forge, what was it like working with the developers, like on this game, and again, like approaching it as this idea of making the definitive version, as opposed to starting from scratch and building the game up like that?
Yeah, I mean, we all knew that the game was great. We all knew that the game had a lot of potential. White Rabbit has always felt like there's more that they could do with the game. And the way that we approached it is we will do what's necessary to make sure that White Rabbit has resources to make the game that they've always wanted to make. So that's kind of been our initial approach, and that's still our approach today. The White Rabbit team is very skilled. They are, absolutely phenomenal to work with. John, the team lead, is actually one of the lead programmers on Deltarune. So he is very skilled when it comes to knowing the game engine, which is Game Maker. So because of that, he's also able to kind of utilize the engine to its maximum potential in order to create all sorts of new challenges and really fine tune the game to make it feel really good. Because in a game like this, physics and user experience really comes down to everything.
Hmm.
So yeah, I mean, really, again, it's kind of just having a very strong alignment between the two teams to have that central goal of making Death's Gambit the most definitive way that we can to make sure that the game is really the best version of this game possible. And it was made easier with the fact that there was already a large fan base with behind the
Hmm.
game, playing the game every day, giving us feedback every day, and that just made it so that it's very easy for us to kind of have that test audience, iterate on everything, and then release everything once it's finally ready.
All right. I guess anything else regarding what's new in Death's Gambit that we didn't touch on that you like to bring up?
Yeah, I mean, I think really we talked a lot about the content. We talked about the endings. There's a lot of really cool stuff in the game. We even hid some very interesting Easter eggs in the game that we're hoping that maybe fans will be able to find. I don't want to spoil anything publicly, but there's certainly some content in the game that is very unconventionally obtained in a video game sense. So with that said, I think it's a perfect time to check out Death's Gambit if you haven't already from years past. If you're a huge fan of Death's Gambit, we also launched a physical edition, and it currently is up for pre-order. We're looking to release the game January of next year to all the major retailers, as well as we're releasing a vinyl record soundtrack of both the original game and the new Afterlife release with all the new music. And then lastly, we have some merchandise as well, such as t-shirts, posters. You can go ahead and check out those merchandise pieces on our store at store.serenityforge.com.
Awesome. So that we only have a limited amount of time today, we'll begin to wrap things up. And if you're free in the future, Z, it'll be great to have one of our more longer chats again if we can find the time.
Yeah, totally. My life is kind of nutty nowadays.
Mhm.
Serenity Forge has grown quite a bit. I think we're somewhere around 40 people now as a company. So it's just been a whirlwind of responsibilities and kind of day-to-day changing of roles. Personally, I'm actually trying to find more ways to spend more time back onto games, working more on the narrative and the game design on our internal titles. But of course, publicly, it's still important for me to talk to people and kind of explain to people some of the things that we're doing. And of course, I always enjoy jumping on the call and chatting with you as well. So, but yeah, I would love to. I would love to down the road. I think that would be really fun.
All right. So to begin to wrap things up for our cast today, anything else upcoming from Serenity Forge that you would like to tease fans about or mention?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few things going on at Serenity Forge. The physical release of the Doki Doki Literature Club Plus is actually coming out very shortly, in a little bit over a week as of today, on October 8th. So, make sure you get those pre-orders in. We, the game is it's selling very quickly. We're running out of stock very quickly. I think we may already have run out of stock. I don't know. I got a message this morning from our distributors about this. So if you're interested in the game, please make sure you go grab it quick. The Where the Water Tastes Like Wine, the physical release is actually currently live as well, and we're running low on stock as well. And yeah, we're releasing the game physically for PS4 and Nintendo Switch. And then lastly, just in terms of upcoming games, we have recently announced our partnership with the Twin Otter Studios on Arcadian Atlas. This game will be launching next year. It's very much inspired by Final Fantasy Tactics. It's kind of this isometric tactical RPG with a very grim and dark story, very similar to something like Game of Thrones or Hamlet in terms of narrative. I highly recommend it. I love grim stories myself. So yeah, maybe go check it out on Steam and wishlist it if you're interested. So yeah, I mean that's pretty much the new things that's happening here at Serenity Forge.
All right. So I think with that, we'll wrap things up for our chat. And yeah, like I said, if we can find the time in the coming weeks, I would love to have more of a longer talk with you, especially about what we've both seen in terms of how much indie development has changed since our last conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. I have a lot of thoughts about that. Considering how I've been working in it for all these years, and yeah, I would love to find some time to talk at some point.
All right. So before I let you go, Z, I guess first of all, do you have any social media you would like to mention? Twitter, Facebook, whatever.
Yeah, I think the best way to engage with Serenity Forge would be on Twitter at Serenity Forge. You can also find me on Twitter at Jinghua Yang, which is my full name, ZhenGhuaYang. And then you can find us on Facebook as well. Our email is pretty open. You can always email us contact at serenityforge.com. And don't forget to sign up for our newsletter as well. We send out very few newsletters, but only important ones for when certain pre-orders are open or certain games are up for grabs. I highly recommend checking that out on our website, serenityforge.com.
All right. And my final question for you: do you have anything you'd like to say to the fans watching to end our cast on?
Yeah, I mean, just absolutely. Thank you so much for the support over the years. Serenity Force has grown quite a bit over the years, and we couldn't do it without the people out there supporting us. Really appreciate it, and also good on you for enjoying good content made by Josh here. So yeah, really, it's this is the right place to be. So it's thank you so much for everything.
All right. Well, Z, we'll wrap things up here. It's been a pleasure chatting with you today. Congratulations on everything that's come with Serenity Forge, and hopefully next time we chat, you'll have more great news to announce.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure, and it's always great to chat with you. So yeah, thanks again.
All right. So for those of you watching, we're going to wrap things up for our cast this week. Be sure to check out Death's Gambit Afterlife. It is out now. If you're watching this recorded, I should have a part of a play of it either on the main channel or on my gameplay channel. So be sure to do all the liking and subscribing there. Check out our Discord and Patreon link down below. And if you are a developer working on an upcoming or recently released game, or just want to chat game design with me, we're always looking for a guest for our live and recorded chats. So come back for daily discussions on game design here and on game wisdom, where some of the art and science of games. Z, again, it has been a pleasure, and I'm sure we'll chat again in the future.
Yeah, thank you so much.
All right. So, folks, have a great rest of your night and take care.